Metal Sonic, or more specifically, Neo Metal Sonic. Few of Eggman's machines have ever been so powerful or so godly. Neo Metal is a machine who lives in the throes of an identity crisis, combined with delusion and an obsession with being better than his arch-rival Sonic the Hedgehog at all costs, one that leads to his downfall quite frequently. Having debuted in 2003's Sonic Heroes, this intimidating figure, driven by rage, jealousy, and the need to surpass and rule over all who live on the planet just to prove a point, Neo Metal Sonic is one of the most powerful threats that Sonic has ever faced. One that overthrew Eggman and was all but on the cusp of complete victory. After giving Hyper Metal Sonic's arc in the OVA an analysis, and to look forward to how Sonic the Hedgehog 4 might be handling Metal Sonic, I thought it was time I went and gave a proper look over the genuine article. The prime Metal Sonic in his finest state. I've often felt that Metal Sonic is underused and underwritten in recent years in the franchise, but a trend that seems to occur is that whenever Neo Metal appears, the stakes are absolutely high, and if a certain overlord appears, well, we'll get to that. Neo Metal Sonic's obsession with Sonic is an interesting one. What truly drives him? How does his psyche actually measure up? And why does he ultimately fail? Why does this inherent belief that he is the real Sonic come back to bite him so much? Well, firstly, we have to start at the beginning to where this all originated. We have to look at what fueled him to become this rage-filled titan on a quest for world domination. And as I said, just to prove a point. So where better to start than with his origins in Sonic CD? In order to really get the point about Neo Metal Sonic, we have to examine the life of Metal Sonic up to that point. And to examine his life, we need to take into account his many defeats by Sonic and his friends. Metal Sonic was created by Dr. Eggman and was designed to mirror Sonic in every conceivable aspect. He was blue, he was fast, and whatever Sonic could do, Metal believed he could do better. Where Sonic was a carefree adventurer, Metal was a strictly bound assassin with only one real goal at the start: to kill Sonic the Hedgehog and establish himself as the real Sonic. To him, our Sonic is just a faker. Metal was Sonic's first true rival, and they first met during the Little Planet incident where he was responsible for kidnapping Amy Rose during Eggman's search for the Time Stones and their dangerous abilities. The two of them did battle across Stardust Speedway, which resulted in Metal's first defeat at the hands of the fake Sonic that he considered so beneath him. This was quite possibly where Metal's obsession began, far more than just programming, but an actually felt obsession. Because on that day, the very purpose he had been created for, he failed. He had been bested by Sonic, the inferior hedgehog. After being revived by Eggman, Metal devoted himself to chasing down and taking on Sonic, even going as far as to steal Tails' rocket to keep up with the tornado. Throughout Sonic 4 Episode 2, he engages in frequent battles with Sonic and Tails, from a battle on a roller coaster track, to using his own airship to try and destroy the tornado, to teaming up with Eggman in a 2v2 battle on the Death Egg Mark II, which results in a rematch of their race, only for Metal to taste defeat, much in the same way as the first. Bear in mind that this game is dubiously canon, but I'm including it here because it's still a key modern Metal appearance. They face each other again during the events of Sonic Triple Trouble in the Atomic Destroyer Zone. Once again, Sonic kicks his ass after a tricky fight, though I must give absolute credit to the 16-bit fan remake, whose reputation has far exceeded the original at this point for making some of the best 2D Sonic vs Metal Sonic fights ever in a single game, which if it could be seen as canon, would have been amazing to fit into Metal's arc. But I can't ignore it, if only just to highlight its existence as a magnificent fan creation. Either way, a Sonic Triple Trouble exists, and Metal got beaten to a pulp in it. In the events of Knuckles Chaotix, Metal Sonic and Eggman went over to a mysterious island in an attempt to harness the power of the Master Emerald, and end up coming across Knuckles and Team Chaotix. At the end of their adventure, Metal Sonic attempts to defeat Knuckles and his team by the power of machinery, but instead is roundly defeated. He retreats. But Eggman has another thing up his sleeve: a dark ring. Infusing Metal with a brand new source of power, he transforms into Metal Sonic Kai, a gigantic, terrifying red kaiju beast of a machine. However, this power was not enough, as he was still taken down by Knuckles and the Chaotix. But for one thing that should be noted, this battle gave Metal Sonic a taste of brutal power, one that he would want to reclaim and utilize to the best he could, the power he needs to be superior. You'd think the humiliation would have stopped by now. No. Sonic the Fighters. Eggman has created a new Death Egg, the Death Egg 2. Sonic heads up there to destroy it and is immediately confronted by Metal Sonic. They engage in hand-to-hand combat, but Sonic smacks the piss out of him and wins. For extra humiliation points, the player can potentially transform into Super Sonic in this battle, thus ruining Metal Sonic's day meticulously. Another side note, this game, like Sonic 4, is probably a little bit more dubious canonically as well, due to the fact that it features 8 Chaos Emeralds and features a new Death Egg 2 before Sonic 4 did, but I'm including it anyway because, again, it's another defeat for Metal. But that's not all. In Sonic Mania, having been thrown back to Stardust Speedway via the Phantom Ruby, Sonic is confronted by Metal Sonic, leading to a battle that results in Eggman giving Metal the aforementioned Phantom Ruby, turning him into a kaiju once again. This time, as Giga Metal, which one must acknowledge that it involves him looking a bit closer to an overlording form he would one day take. His design here is absolutely awesome. But unfortunately, he was still no match for Sonic, who exploited the weakness of the Phantom Ruby's protective casing, causing Metal to revert back to his base form, having once again floundered the grand power that had been given to him. There was even a time after this in Sonic Mania Adventures, where Metal Sonic had managed to obtain all 7 of the Chaos Emeralds after stealing them, and transformed into a super-powered version of himself, and engaged in a fierce fight with Sonic, Tails, Mighty the Armadillo, and Ray the Squirrel. It's an incredibly tense fight where Metal seemed to actually be getting the upper hand. Having achieved a super form of his own once more, with the Chaos Emeralds being by far the most powerful things he had gotten his hands on, surely this time he could finally kill Sonic, and as a bonus, his friends. Well, not quite, no, as Tails managed to get Sonic to hold Metal still for long enough for him to be trapped in a force field and have the Chaos Emeralds extracted from him. Metal still wasn't giving up though, as he attempted to harness the power of the stolen Master Emerald, much like his younger brother Mega Sonic once did. But unfortunately, this didn't work out either, as all it got him was being socked in the face by Knuckles, who then takes the Master Emerald back. Defeat after defeat after defeat, each time causing Metal to become more and more determined to prove his superiority to his alleged fake, causing that hatred within his head of electricity and circuitry to grow and take him over more and more. I'm sure all he could think about was defeating Sonic, but it just never seemed possible. Make no mistake, Metal Sonic is not a flat robot. He is an emotional machine. He does feel things. It's just those things happen to be all negative and hateful. As we established, he is the antithesis of Sonic in every way. So why can't he defeat him? It should be easy, right? He is Sonic, but perfected. He has all of his abilities. Statistically and logically, he is the clear winner. So why is he always getting beaten? It makes no sense to Metal. After all this time, all this effort, all that power, he continuously fails endlessly. And the little ego he has within all that data finally broke. But all that does is strengthen his resolve. He must kill Sonic at any cost. Metal Sonic's relationship with Dr. Eggman is a fascinating one. Throughout all of these incidents, Metal remained by his side unwaveringly, and Eggman continued to use him for many of his plans. It's said that their relationship is familial in a way. The two were apparently a team against Sonic for good, until that hedgehog could finally be put down. He was seemingly bound to this fate, of which he accepted it without question. And to do that, he needed more power. Eggman knew this, Metal knew this, and so, the Neo Metal Sonic project was born. The upgrading process takes a long time, something established in the IDW comics which we'll be discussing later. In my mind, my little theory? Well, when you look around Eggman's base in the Mystic Ruins enough in Sonic Adventure, you will find Metal Sonic in a tank. Normally he's out and about, but now he's restrained, and he has no involvement throughout the incident with Chaos, or the following incident with Shadow and the Space Colony arc in Sonic Adventure 2. Metal had been very active in the events following the destruction of the original Death Egg in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and probably would have been a notable candidate to kidnap either Birdie or Froggy as opposed to the E100 robots. But that can't happen if he's going to be undergoing a procedure to make him an even better machine. Eggman instead ended up developing the E100s such as Gamma, Beta, etc., and I believe that it was over the course of Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 that Metal Sonic was being upgraded into Neo Metal Sonic, just in time for the events of Heroes to take place. And over the course of this time, he plotted. He had nothing else to do. The creation of Neo Metal Sonic marked a pivotal transformation. Metal's new form gave him more than just the drive to defeat Sonic, but it aspired to redefine his existence beyond being Eggman's instrument. His conviction that he is the real Sonic, combined with his hatred of the supposed imposter, began to twist his mind, evolving his intelligence further until he had only one plan to execute. World domination to him was really just a chance to finally erase his insecurities that had been growing since his first defeat. It was a chance to prove once and for all that he is better than Sonic. Let's take a brief moment to talk about the upgrades that Neo Metal had done to him. Overall, his design had been enhanced. His krills are significantly longer, he has gauntlets, boots, spikes, a cape around his waist and new white patterns on his body, with longer spikes on his mouth area. He looks incredible, to be honest, as well as hella edgy. But as well as this, he has the ability to scan and subsequently shapeshift into anything he chooses, by reducing his body into a liquid metal form, much like the T-1000 in Terminator 2. And perhaps most key to this incarnation of Metal Sonic, he can speak. Metal never speaks. One of the things that makes him so different to Sonic is just that, but now he can intimidate people through his words. Upon the completion of his upgrade, Neo Metal put his plan into motion. He overpowered and locked away Dr. Eggman, betraying the scientist who had given him his new powers, and then proceeding to impersonate him to obtain complete control of the Eggman Empire. His plan? To ascend to his ultimate form to defeat Sonic. But for that, he needed data. And lots of it. But honestly, it certainly seems like no way to treat a father figure. Neo Metal Sonic throughout Heroes honestly plays a blinder of a plan throughout the whole incident. Whilst he wasn't part of the events of Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, he was for sure aware of them, at least on a technical level. He initiates a grand plan to obtain as much biodata as he needs in 3 days. He starts off by kidnapping Froggy and Chocola for their connections to the god of destruction, Chaos. He'd be able to scan Chaos's biodata through the DNA they both have, and thus he manages to kidnap them both easily while disguised as Sonic. After that, he then invites Sonic, Tails and Knuckles to face him and defeat him via a letter in order to goad them on, and then orchestrates and improvises an entire sequence of events that ends up with 4 sets of teams on the same set path at different times. But Neo Metal persists with this convoluted plan for the purpose of obtaining their data after every encounter, impersonating Dr. Eggman, or rather robotic clones of Eggman, and he's successful. He manages to obtain the data he needs to evolve. He gets Chaos's data, Sonic's data, and even by some stroke of luck, the data of the ultimate lifeform himself, Shadow the Hedgehog. He executes everything perfectly, and all throughout his control. Throughout the main stories, you constantly face Neo Metal's rendition of Dr. Eggman, and it's very clear throughout that Eggman's behaviour is not really in line with his behaviour in the adventure games.
Stop your futile efforts! You just make fools of yourself! Why not have some fun while you can? After all, you only have one game, and we know who's going to win. Don't get too excited, boys! Those were the easy ones! Enough of this! Sonic, Tails, Knuckles! I'm to be your maker! I'll show you what real evil is!
He's louder, more bombastic, more shouty, and at times genuinely seems to be a lot more manic than Adventure Eggman ever was. But it kinda tracks when you consider that this is indeed Neo Metal pretending to be Eggman, and thus this is what Neo Metal perceives Eggman to be. The letter he writes to Sonic and his friends is, well, One could easily see this as a very stupid thing to do, and it's very clearly a trap or a law that Sonic actively decides to fall into for the purpose of stopping Eggman's plan. But of course, none of them suspect Metal, and all of them are confident of being able to stop Eggman's plans at this point. It's also important to keep in mind that Metal was only originally expecting to face Team Sonic initially. Team Dark got involved after Shadow and Omega were actively broken out by Rouge, an unpredictable element. Team Chaotix was only involved thanks to the real Dr. Eggman requesting their backup to eventually save him, and Team Rose got involved to save Chocola and Froggy after their kidnapping. For the most part, despite any behavioural differences, Metal Sonic's impersonation of Eggman dupes everyone, well, with the notable exception of Vector, who worked out that the real Eggman was their client, after Eggman does a pretty piss-poor job of keeping a secret to them. Although much like Eggman, Metal also manages to nearly give the game away himself when facing Team Dark.
Destroy Dr. Eggman. You must be Omega. Is that any way to treat your creator? Now witness your master's real power.
He immediately notices his slip-up and quickly asserts himself to prevent any suspicion arousing. Metal wouldn't have met Omega. The E100s were all created and mostly retired or destroyed in the time it took Metal to become Neo Metal in the first place. And by then, Omega was locked away. Same with Shadow, who was suffering with amnesia following his fall at the end of Sonic Adventure 2. Shadow asks Neo Metal about his memory, to which Metal tells him he has no past to remember. Metal wouldn't be privy to the full story, but he would know about the androids. Spitefully, Metal then places one of the Shadow androids aboard the Egg Albatross, perhaps in a conceited effort to screw with Shadow while he collects his data. It's entirely possible. His disguise isn't perfect, but it works well enough for the intent that he has. Eventually, all of the teams converge on the final fortress, the Chaotix rescuing Dr. Eggman, and eventually, Neo Metal Sonic reveals himself to the teams. And boy does he start by making a statement.
All living things kneel before your master.
At this point, he is firmly convinced that he has won, and now the method of doing so is at hand. He obliterates the command tower of the final fortress and utilizes the debris to create a new body for himself, piece by piece, brick by brick. And eventually, he achieves his newest form, Metal Madness. But he's still transforming, still evolving, still attached to the final fortress. Attempting to buy time for Sonic, Tails and Knuckles to achieve their super forms, Metal is bombarded from all sides by Teams Dark, Rose and Chaotix, but they are unable to stop Metal from fully completing his transformation. He literally grows his rings and takes flight like a terrifying mechanical mythical beast. Sonic transforms into Super Sonic, empowering Tails and Knuckles in the process, and they take flight to take on the monster. Metal Overlord's design is insanely chaotic. He has effectively become a gigantic mecha dragon, a brand new kaiju. You may wonder where Metal got the idea for such a transformation, but as we established, he got a taste of this kind of power back in Knuckles Chaotix, and retroactively back in Sonic Mania. He has been that kind of gigantic metal Megazord before. He knows the power that he can have. He can build the schematics with that in mind, a whole manner of details that he can strive towards and improve upon and perfect. Each time he transformed, he needed an exterior power source to do it, whether it be a dark ring or a phantom ruby, but no. This time, it was all him, and he is proud. Without a doubt, this is Metal's most powerful form so far. The fight as it goes on reveals more about Metal's inner psychology now that he's finally taking on Sonic in his most powerful form as he desired, because ultimately, this is what it was all about. This is what it came down to.
Long time no see, Sonic. My lonesome copy.
As the fight between the four continues, Metal opens up more about his loathing and his frustrations when fighting Sonic.
Sonic, I was created for the sole purpose of destroying you. But I can never seem to defeat you. That is why I transform my own body with my own hands.
It's all been for Sonic. Metal's obsession has taken him to the point of extreme body modification just to defeat him. After having been taken down by him so many times before, he's actively chosen to go as overkill as possible to strike back, which does make this following interaction actually quite funny.
You actually thought you could defeat me by transforming into a monster? Here we go!
That was the past. Now you're nothing but a speck of dust to me.
Classic deflection on Metal's part, because this is so clearly a lie to an extreme degree. All Metal can think about is Sonic, and trying to defeat or surpass him in any way he can.
See me as I am, no longer afraid of anything. I shall become the ultimate overlord, ruling as the world's most supreme being.
Super Team Sonic finally inflict enough damage onto Metal Overlord to destroy his new form, and he plummets back down to the final fortress in complete disbelief and frustration, screaming about how he is the real Sonic.
Why? I had it all! I am the ultimate overlord, Metal Sonic! I am the real Sonic!
In some ways, you can't help but acknowledge that Metal Sonic really did try this time. There are very few villains that Sonic has faced who have gone to such lengths to beat him, to the extent of overthrowing their creator, orchestrating an entire data heist while also clearly improvising on the fly with new people constantly getting involved, and building a whole new body for the sole reason of sticking it to the blue blur. But Metal Sonic is that guy.
No use. But why can't I defeat you?
Because we're Sonic heroes.
But unfortunately, none of his attempts are enough. They have never been, and likely will never be enough, as far as we know. He lands back down on the final fortress, damaged and broken both physically and mentally. Unable to retain his Neo form that he endured so much to become and achieve so much with, he transforms back into his regular base form, finally giving up, and starting to believe that he just can't win against Sonic. No matter what he does, he will never be able to beat him. He's just too strong. He shuts down, left in the hands of Omega and Shadow, who are clearly having an ounce of sympathy over what Metal became in the end. This clearly sentient being that was fashioned into a weapon just like them. Now broken and defeated, Metal Sonic. An attempt at creating a Sonic to defeat a Sonic. He may have failed repeatedly, but Eggman would have no idea he would go to such lengths. And he would make sure that he never would again. Sonic Heroes not only spelt the end of Neo Metal Sonic's appearances in the games, but it was also the end of Metal Sonic's most relevant time in the mainline Sonic games in general. From Heroes onwards, he has been relegated to middling roles in spin-offs and cameo appearances. This has been going on for 22 years. I don't like it. This drip-feeding approach they've given him, like retroactively sticking him into Sonic Colors Ultimate, just doesn't work for me. But in the future, they may have good reason to do something with him. Can't think what. But for now, Metal Sonic became just another badnik under Eggman's command. However, there is seemingly a canon reason for this. According to the official Japanese Sonic channel, his translated bio has this section. He had an ego due to the high performance of AI chips, and planned to improve his body and take control of the Eggman army, but was thwarted by Sonic and the others. Later, he is reverted to his original obedient fighting mecha by Dr. Eggman. This is later confirmed by Metal himself in the IDW comics, where he says that Eggman removed the rebelliousness from my coding. So we can safely say, Metal Sonic's body ended up back in the possession of Eggman, who then made it his duty to make sure nothing like this ever happened again, and restrained Metal's personality in order to make sure he would never even consider doing anything so drastic to him in the name of destroying Sonic. Instead of being his side-by-side minion, Metal became more of an enforcer badnik, a bodyguard, helping when he is needed to, such as during the event where he teams up with Shadow when Eggman Nego attempts to release the Ifrit in Sonic Rivals 2. Eggman's later inventions like Orbot, Cubot and Sage surpassed him in his assistant duties, but this time, he is going to remain loyal to Dr. Eggman. Or does he? Whilst Metal Sonic never does anything on the level of overthrowing and entrapping Eggman ever again, he does retain a petty streak within him. Unbeknownst to Eggman, he took part in the Second World Grand Prix alongside Team Dark, while disguised as Eggman's creation E10000B, whom Eggman had entered into the race to gather all the racing data. Metal, once again tempted by power, stole the racing data for himself and challenged Sonic to another race, which he obviously loses, and then flees as a result of having tasted defeat at the hands of his rival yet another time. Off-screen, Eggman clearly recovers him and perhaps does a bit more purging on his memory, despite this being just a petty misdemeanor all things considered. But it does seem like Metal only exists to just get dealt L's from Sonic all the time at this point, which is not honourable. But enough is enough. All this is in preparation of what comes next. It's time to get serious, because something is about to happen, and none of it is good.
That's why it's called war.
Sonic Forces saw Eggman wage a war over 6 months that saw him nearly take over the entire world with the power of Infinite and the Phantom Ruby, including and not limited to having Sonic kidnapped, Shadow being sent God knows where, Tails having gone quote-unquote insane, and everyone else basically under Eggman's heel, as a resistance led by Knuckles tries to hold back the tide. That is, of course, until Sonic was released by the Rookie, after which Infinite and Eggman were promptly defeated, and everyone in the world could begin trying to heal from the events. Oh, what a game that was. Anyway, throughout those events it did stand out that Metal Sonic was never actually present, but Eggman and Infinite utilized plenty of phantom duplicates of Metal Sonic for the team to fight. But it begs the question, where was the real Metal Sonic during all of this? Well, as it turns out, the canon IDW series of Sonic the Hedgehog comics has the answer. During the execution of his grand plans to take over the world, Dr. Eggman had decided it was time for Metal Sonic to be once again upgraded into Neo Metal Sonic, albeit without his capacity for evolved thinking and thus betrayal. This time, Metal was subservient to his creator, willing to enact any order for him. Much like his time in the adventure games, his upgrade began, and it took a long time. Eggman's plan was for Metal to become his ultimate weapon in battle. With him, the war surely may have been won. He was given Eggman's biodata, his genius, his drive, his vision. But unfortunately for Neo Metal, by the time he was completed, the war had already been lost for Eggman and his side, and Eggman himself had gone mysteriously missing, much to Neo Metal's dismay. So instead, unwilling to let the Empire fall without him, Neo Metal assumed the identity of Eggman once more, with the grand intention of taking over the world in his name, and fully prepared to give it to him once he was located. This is certainly a change of intent from Metal's original plan in Heroes. Back then he was overthrowing his creator to transcend him and crush Sonic, but now he's simply emulating him. Neo Metal can talk now once again. He has a personality. He's witty, he's driven, he has power, but he no longer has those extreme capabilities to hang on to it. Eggman has him in the palm of his hand, whether he is there or not. I feel like Neo Metal in this form is more of a tragic figure than any of us have come to regard him as. We've seen this guy over the years and all he has been through trying to win one singular goal. And he came close. He came the closest he ever has that one time. And then he lost it all. Maybe deep down he almost reached a similar conclusion that Metal Sonic in the OVA had. That there can only be one Sonic, and he has resigned himself to never being able to beat him. That is, of course, until Eggman changed his programming, infected him with his own biodata, and resigned Metal to a life trapped as a slave to his creator. And this arc epitomizes it. Well, yes, a criticism I have of Metal in the modern games is that he's not much more than a badnik for Eggman. You can kinda understand why. Because Eggman made him this way out of fear of what he could become, and he wants to stay in control. He curbed his ambition and created his ultimate servant in the process. Neo Metal began executing his new plan. While Sonic and his friends managed to thwart the attacks, in the process, Knuckles leaves the Master Emerald unguarded, allowing Neo Metal to swoop in for an invasion of Angel Island. But eventually, the ensuing Egg Fleet catches the attention of Sonic and Tails, who fly up to intercept. While on his way to extract data, Sonic immediately comes face to face with Dr. Eggman. But that's impossible, because Sonic knows the truth. The real Eggman is currently an amnesiac living in the village under the name Mr. Tinker. He builds roller coasters and repairs things. So Neo Metal drops the facade and explains his revival before Sonic attacks him. However, Sonic has fallen into his trap, as once again, Neo can recollect his biodata, making him even more of a powerful threat than before. This is the first time that Sonic has ever directly fought Metal Sonic in his Neo form. It has always been either his base form or Overlord form, so it's been long overdue for this form to finally show Sonic what he is made of. Neo Metal Sonic here gives off a different aura to how he seemed to be in Heroes in terms of his overall behaviour. He's calm, collected, and he has once again fallen into the trap of believing that he has already won. It's not like Heroes where he was plagued with desperation to get things right, fueled by his obsession to destroy Sonic. No, this time he is a lot more methodical. He is calmly executing his plan, forcing Sonic to retreat, and then assimilating Angel Island and the Master Emerald to the extent of building a throne upon it. This image is perhaps the most dominant that Neo Metal has ever been. Until the next issue, that is. But this is a hell of a step forward. Neo Metal's plan is going off without a hitch. As the Resistance launch a full-scale attack on the island, Sonic and Knuckles confront Neo Metal, and for the first successful time, Metal Sonic uses the power of the Master Emerald to transform into Super Neo Metal Sonic, his very own golden form. The role has now been reversed from Sonic Heroes' final battle. Instead of Sonic going gold, Neo Metal has gone gold and he has achieved a new form, and it looks pretty magnificent. Neo is fully in control here and it shows. Sonic and Knuckles are barely able to land a hit on him, and get seriously injured in the process. Neo is untouchable and he knows it. Neither of them know what to do, and it looks like he's about to win. He gloats, knowing he's now finally able to defeat two of the people who have defeated him the most in the past, caused him the most pain, the most insecurity. Inner peace and a solid plan is finally at hand. Until surprise attack! Shadow the Hedgehog arrives and beats the ever-loving crap out of Super Neo Metal, causing him to lose his super form. But whilst he loses that, he gains something much greater. The biodata of the ultimate life form himself. Shadow didn't think his data would allow Neo Metal to be able to transform just yet, but unfortunately he was wrong. Neo laughs as he realizes he's been given everything he needs to achieve his ultimate form now. One that surpasses Super Neo, one that goes even further beyond Metal Overlord, one that would allow him true victory over his foes once and for all. Sonic, Knuckles and Shadow can only look in horror as Neo Metal's transformation has begun, his mouth growing like a xenomorph. He utilizes the power of the biodata he has gotten and the Master Emerald and becomes a huge mechanical dragon-esque beast once more. The Master Overlord. The design is extraordinarily grand. It's similar to Metal Overlord but significantly more streamlined whilst also much bigger. The Master Emerald docked within his lower body looks tiny. It shows the scale. After so many different kaiju forms that Metal has taken on over the years, whether it be Kai, Giga or Overlord, this one is the most powerful, and he knows it. It's interesting to compare and contrast these two different mindsets of Overlord. Metal Overlord was obsessed with besting Sonic and taking over the world just to prove that he is the superior Sonic, that he is the real deal. But now, as Master Overlord, he even says it himself. I will realize Dr. Eggman's dream of a global empire. Even as the most powerful form he's ever accomplished, he is still slavishly devoted to Eggman, even though he could claim the empire as his right now. But no, he promises to end the resistance and win for Eggman. In fact, in a neat twist, it takes Sonic himself to remind him of his vendetta towards him. He mocks Metal, reminding him that they are now no longer anything alike despite Metal calling him a loathsome copy. Metal falls for it, flustered, calling himself Sonic Perfected. Even now, Metal can still make room for a petty, immature gloat over his rivalry with Sonic, and he will never really move on from it. That's what makes Metal Metal. And if he cannot be the real Sonic, then for sure he wants to be the best Sonic. The whole Resistance works together to attack Metal from all angles, including Tails ramming him with a ship, all until Knuckles is finally able to remove the Master Emerald from Metal's body, causing him to finally fall once more. Metal falls to the ground, his body unable to sustain either the Overlord or the Neo forms, and he ends up back in his base form. Neo Metal Sonic once again having been unceremoniously defeated, his great plan put to a swift end. All of that data, Eggman's, Sonic's, Shadow's, all gone to waste, and his beloved Neo form, gone perhaps never to be seen again. Who can say? The core difference between Metal Sonic in the OVA and Metal Sonic in the main timeline can be established through the epilogue scene to Metal's arc. Sonic and Tails partially repair Metal and give him the chance to establish a truce. Sonic tells him that Eggman is done. There's nothing to fight for anymore. It's over. All he wants is to give Metal Sonic a chance for peace. To end the fighting once and for all, he extends his hand. In essence, Sonic wanted to save Metal Sonic from a life of slavish devotion, a life of obsession, and let him live his own life. Show him that two Sonics can coexist. In the OVA, Sonic extended his hand to Hyper Metal, wanting to save his life, showing him that two Sonics can coexist, but Metal slaps it away, refusing his life to be saved, because there can only be one Sonic. And in the main timeline, Metal slaps Sonic's hand away again, refusing this truce, because there can only be one Sonic. He flies away, Sonic happy enough to let him live his own life and make his own choice. The OVA ends with Metal respecting Sonic enough to let him survive. The main timeline continues with Metal disrespecting Sonic enough to simply force himself to survive. And in the end, Metal Sonic makes his choice. He returns to his creator, and just the sight of him restores Eggman's memory, and Mr. Tinker is dead. All by himself, Metal Sonic wanted to hand Eggman the world. Unfortunately, he couldn't quite get there, but if he had chosen to live his own life, that would have been the end of it. The world would have grown more peaceful, but unfortunately, the devotion he has to Eggman, the man who kept him attached, kept him staying in one place mentally, has doomed the cycle to begin once again. And the once grand, once ambitious Metal Sonic, who nearly had the world at his fingertips, becomes a mere servant once more. For all his intelligence and power, Metal Sonic was ultimately doomed to fail, no matter what his mindset was. His obsession blinds him, making him unpredictable. He may believe himself to be superior, but his inability to escape his need to prove himself undoes him in so many ways. Unlike Sonic, who thrives on freedom and self-expression, Metal Sonic is shackled by his own need to surpass Sonic, and if he isn't doing that, his life is to serve Eggman. His transformation into Metal Overlord is almost symbolic in a way, highlighted by the IDW arc. The bigger and more powerful he becomes, the further he drifts from what he originally sought, to be the real Sonic, the superior Sonic, the perfect Sonic. His failure is inevitable because despite all his efforts, he cannot change the fundamental truth. He is not the real Sonic, and he will never be the real Sonic, and he knows it deep down. Neo Metal Sonic's story is ultimately tragic. The Neo form represents Metal Sonic at his most free, but he cannot escape his programming anymore. The Metal Overlord incident proved to be a permanent sword of Damocles that Eggman will forever keep held over him. Sonic's freedom will forever ensure that Metal Sonic will never be a match. So is Metal Sonic doomed to repeat this cycle? Or could he ever show a sign of evolving beyond it? Or is this just it for him? Is Metal doomed to live out the rest of his days as a shadow of Sonic? I guess that is only a question we'll find out in the future of the franchise. I really want another Metal Sonic focused game story. Neo Metal needs to come back for at least one more hurrah, and we should have one more match between Sonic and Metal as the main antagonist. He deserves that. One to finally resolve their differences and peak their rivalry. It's been 32 years. I think it deserves a fresh new highlight. And with Metal's inclusion in Sonic 4, we might just get that. He deserves to forge a path of his own. Until that day, Metal Sonic remains one of the most tragically doomed by design foes that Sonic has ever faced. Thank you for tuning in to my Neo Metal Sonic essay. I really hope you enjoyed it because this was by far my most ambitious video to date, so I'm kinda glad it's over and done with. But it was still massively fascinating to revisit everything like the IDW comics and Heroes again. Neo Metal Sonic's journey is one that I believe has a lot unsaid. It's all kinda subtextual, and I kinda like that. So please do tell me, what are your thoughts on Neo Metal Sonic? Do you want him to come back? How would you go about including Metal Sonic into the next mainline game? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, see ya!